The panel we are welcoming you to is Filmmakers in Focus. We are here at the Acura House of Energy. I cannot leave without giving a shout out to our amazing partner, Acura, for this beautiful space. Yes, it is worth it. If you were here last year, it is amazingly warm this year and inviting, and they've done an amazing job. Each year, this space keeps getting better, and we're able to support more voices and support storytelling. So Acura has been an official sponsor for Sundance for 14 years. It's amazing to see that mission on display here in this panel and all of the other great works that they're doing throughout the Sundance Festival. Today's panel is going to be moderated by IMDb video producer Trey Wesley, who is our triple threat. Trey is a talented writer-producer himself and also amazing interviewer, so you all are in great hands with Trey. So thank you all to our panelists, and Trey, I'm going to let you take it from here.
Thank you so much, Nikki. Give a round of applause for Nikki. Woo! Y'all, I mean, everyone looks so good. The energy in here is fantastic. Let's give everyone another round of applause. One more time. Yes. You know, I love IMDb so much because IMDb has such a long history of enabling filmmakers to tell the kind of stories they want to tell with the people they want to tell it with. So this conversation will be diving deep into those narratives, getting into the filmmaking process, challenges you've overcome, and just all around filmmaking. So we're going to have some fun. Is that all right? Yeah. Is that all right with y'all? All right. So let's get started. Introduce everybody. Sitting right next to me, we have Nico Casavecchia, writer and producer of Border Hopper. Yeah. Sitting next to him, we have Alex Stapleton, director of God Save Texas, The Price of Oil. All right, we have Wang, director, writer, and producer of Dee. And Lana Wilson, director of Look Into My Eyes. All right, so I love starting panels with this prompt. It kind of sets the tone a little bit. Complete the prompt for me. I fell in love with filmmaking when?
How short is this?
Take your time. Take your time. We're getting cues.
Now, I fell in love with filmmaking by watching movies, and then I think by doing them. I think doing things for me is where I come from. Yeah. But can I say something? Yeah. I'm so excited to be here with everybody. I'm just like overwhelmed. And also because IMDb is the tool I use for stalking everybody in this room and knowing what you're up to. So I feel like it's a good thing. All right, I'll pass it to
Also, wait,
Alex.
Can we give a quick shout out to Nico's outfit for a second?
Yes.
Very fly, Sundance fashion. Thank you very much. Top with the pink hat up here. That's how you do it. Exactly. Alex, how about you?
I fell in love with filmmaking through my mother, actually. My mother is a fine arts photographer and took me to, I didn't grow up watching anything that came out in theaters that was appropriate probably to watch as a child. I grew up on Fassbinder and John Waters, and had a queer mother who was was a renegade and probably shouldn't have been watching Female Trouble at the age of 8. But here we are. And I also do want to thank everyone for being here in IMDb, because for me, IMDb was, when my name got put on IMDb, I had arrived. So.
I feel that.
Absolutely. All right, Sean.
I fell in love with filmmaking through skating. I think skating was like my first love. I was probably like 12 or 13. Got into cameras, photography, videos through skating. And then I always loved movies, didn't really think I could be a filmmaker. I was making videos with my friends, didn't think it was filmmaking. Discovered Spike Jonze's work, who was like a skate video guy, and I was like, oh my God. That kind of cracked everything open.
I fell in love with filmmaking. Similar to some of the stories here, my stepmother watched a lot of movies. My dad, who is here, took me to the Seattle Film Festival a lot growing up. And the movie In the Mood for Love, the Wang Kar-wai film, is I think the first movie I saw where I realized it's not just the words that are being said. It's not just the script. Cinema is all of these other senses and aspects as well.
Absolutely. All right. We're going to dive deep into their Sundance projects, all right? Because you all have some incredible projects that have screened and are screening during this amazing festival. So, Nico, we'll start with you. Tell us about your Sundance project this year.
All right, well, let's do it. Border Hopper is a short film playing in program number 4, premiering tomorrow at noon. It's important to get it out.
Yep.
It's an elevated magic realism take on an actual experience that Mercedes Arturo here in the audience, my wife and I, went through when we were waiting for our green card to get to our homes. So basically a lot of you know, if you had like a green card process, there's a moment in your green card that you are what we experts call you're in limbo. So you basically got the green card approved. I see some nodding faces. You got your green card approved, but it's not. You don't get it yet, and that lasts for about like a month. In our case, lasted for like a whole year and more. And so I had to do this job abroad, and I couldn't because we couldn't travel. And I applied to this emergency travel permit. So the short is kind of like a dramatization of the situation. We were going through that experience, telling each other, this plays like a movie. It has the stakes, it has like the horrors, the jump scares. We started coping with the situation by taking notes, and that was turned into a script. And it's a horror thriller. And you know, I think there's a magical thing about art where alchemy happens, right? Where you turn shit into shinola, and like now we have a short in Sundance out of like that horrible show that it was that we had to go through. So I'm very excited that we had to do it, and it's a fun short. It plays like a comedy. My stars are here: the amazing Gabriel Ortega, Santiago Reyes, who play the couple, play Mercedes and I, gender swapped, and you're gonna have fun. This is not a bummer, okay? Okay, that's it.
We're excited for that one. Thank you, Nico. Alex, what about you?
My film is, I'm a documentarian, and God Save Texas is a trilogy that will premiere over the course of this next week. My film, The Price of Oil, was a departure from my normal documentaries, which I think I do a lot of sports documentaries and things in the social justice space. This documentary was me turning the camera on myself and my family, which was insane and very uncomfortable. But my family, I'm a seventh-generation Texan, Black Texan. My ancestors were enslaved in Galveston, and I went back to Texas to try to reckon with what does it mean to be from a place like Houston, Texas, that is built around oil and gas, but to be so outside of that as a Black Texan, and to kind of challenge the myth of Texas. When we think about, probably everyone in this room, when you think about Texas, you think about J.R. Ewing or cowboys or all of the stereotypes, and they're always white people. And there's a lot of Black people in Texas. The idea of a cowboy is from Black culture. And I really, my grandfather was a cowboy, a real cowboy, and I really wanted to kind of flip the script, but also kind of tell this story about, how we haven't benefited from oil and gas yet. Oil and gas have definitely, we are dealing with the havoc from environmental reasons and other things that we are forced to live with in our communities. So that's God Save Texas.
Woo! That's incredible.
I should say there's two other installments of the trilogy. One is directed by Richard Linklater. He's from Huntsville, and that's about the prison, about growing up in a town where prison is the main economy. And the last one is directed by Ileana Sosa, who's from El Paso, and talks about growing up in that community as a first-generation Texan. So.
Cannot wait for that one. Sean, what about you?
Our movie is called DD. We premiered last night. We had our world premiere.
Yes, round of applause. It's a big deal.
It's a narrative feature film. It's my first feature film. We had our premiere last night, so I'm a little tired. So apologies, I'm a little sleepy. But the movie is, or DD means little brother in Mandarin, but it's also a very endearing term that a lot of Chinese parents call their younger sons. It's what my mom used to call me. It's what my dad used to call me. My grandmothers used to call me. And the movie was kind of inspired by the coming-of-age classics that I loved. Movies about adolescence like Stand By Me, Ratcatcher, The Sandlot, 8th Grade, Water Lilies, all the movies like that I see a version of myself in their stories, but I don't demographically align with any of their protagonists, but I resonate with their struggles, their joys, their pains. And I realized in all those types of movies that I loved, I never saw a kid who looked like me. Like the movie poster of like a 13-year-old Asian American kid does not exist in American cinema. Or maybe it does, there's one, but low key. And so I was really inspired the seed of the idea really was, what if you took a movie like Stand By Me, but had it star people who looked and talked and felt like the kids that I grew up with. That was like the very initial seed. And then it kind of grew and grew and grew and kind of became a love letter to immigrant moms, my immigrant mom, kind of encased in the trappings of a coming-of-age story like Stand By Me. And it's, ultimately I think it explores the shame and love that can, manifest in a young Asian American boy's life in the late 2000s, whether it's like personal shame, cultural shame, societal shame. But it's very funny.
Can't confirm. We have some staffers at IMDb who screened it last night. They're obsessed. We're all like raving about it. Must see right there. Yes. And Lana, what about you?
So my film is called Look Into My Eyes, and it follows a group of New York City psychics as they conduct deeply intimate readings with their clients. At the start, you're plunged into these sessions with all different kinds of people in New York, and then over the course of the film, you slowly get to know the psychics themselves. And you learn that they are movie maniacs, they are aspiring actors, show business types, and they also, many of them have profound experiences with grief and loss that inform their sessions. And so ultimately the movie is about really how we as human beings need a witness in order to better see ourselves.
That is incredible. We're trying to prepare young filmmakers who are coming up for the challenges ahead. What was the biggest obstacle in getting your Sundance project made, and how did you overcome it? Anybody can start. Anybody.
Don't make me start.
Nico, go for it. You
Okay, I'll start.
talking.
Easy to come up with obstacles.
Okay.
This is my 5th feature film,
Woo.
and I think
Yes, round of
but
applause.
I think
Exactly.
I went in thinking I sort of know what I'm doing now. This time will be easier. That's never true, and it's always completely new. And I remember on this film thinking, there's no main character, there's no story, there's not even a clock. I remember thinking, God, I wish I could have even done a seasonal winter, spring, summer, fall. That would have given some kind of arc to this. It was so hard, and I felt like I was kind of hitting against the ceiling of my creativity and ability. And it was like back to the beginning. It really was. It was like, wow, it's like starting over. Everything has these totally new challenges, and I think that's the hard part about filmmaking, but it's also what's good about it, is that it's always different and you always have to keep pushing yourself and reinventing what you're doing. But that was the big challenge for me.
I love that. My biggest takeaway is pushing yourself, evolving as a filmmaker. I love that. Anyone else? Go for it, Alex.
I would say, the art of being able to pivot under pressure is like it never goes away. It's always there. And I think for documentary filmmaking, we don't really usually go into the field knowing exactly what the end product is going to be. So it's not that scripted projects know exactly how it's going to be either, but it's we write in the edit bay. And I think that for God Save Texas, Rick had completed his film, and it's Richard Linklater, a film god, and I'm watching his film, and I'm like, oh my God, what am I gonna do? And so as I got more familiar with my family, like understanding that it was at the beginning of COVID, so that was also a really, really big problem that we had to face. The more I trusted my instincts of the story is with my family, and it's okay. It's okay that I tell other people's stories. My family has a story too. And to be comfortable with that, and once I made that decision to own it, and to let that be my North Star during the process of making the film. We made the film during COVID, also in Texas. If anyone is from Texas, we had a big freeze. I don't know if you guys remember that the whole state lost power. We were shooting during that. And I lost 3 family members because of COVID and my uncle in the freeze. And I had just shot with them. And I think it was just it was a horrible situation, but I was determined to figure out how to bring them to life in my film. And that was very much one of the biggest challenges that I've ever faced as a filmmaker, and turning it into something.
A quick follow-up for you. What did you learn about yourself during that process? I'm so curious. You're a champion. What did you learn?
What did I learn about myself? I was a Texan in exile for over 20 years, and I learned maybe I need to go home to tell more stories. My state is under threat right now, and it's really serious. They're banning books in Texas. The governor is hell-bent on erasing history, erasing whole groups of people that have contributed so much to the state of Texas. And I think that it's a, you know, to use my craft to be able to be a part of that fight, to link those two things together. In my career, I've never done anything quite like that. And I think I realized, like, there's a way to create, I have a craft that allows me to have people, to create empathy for situations that they may not understand.
Thank you for sharing that. Sean? Yeah, round of applause. Thank you. Sean, what about you?
I think, I mean, like, there's the usual challenges every filmmaker faces, like time, resources, financing. But I think the thing I learned the most on this project was just learning to lean on the people around you, you know, and like, I had done a lot of shorts, you know, prior to this feature film, doc shorts, narrative shorts, and I think so many of those were passion projects, and they were like so small and homegrown, and you know, when you just don't have a lot of resources, you're very hands-on, you do it yourself, and part of it was I liked doing it all myself. Like, I'm like, oh, I like to tinker, I like to edit, and then, you know, by doing a feature, but when you're doing it at that level too, like, no one is like, you need to deliver this in 2 weeks because the DCP is da-da-da. You're sort of just like on your own schedule, on your own terms. So all my shorts took like over a year to finish, because no one's asking for anything. You're just like, I'm gonna take my time, but it's a long, long process. And I think with this feature, I just kind of learned that like, I need to let the people around me help me, otherwise I'm gonna burn out. Like, so quickly, I learned that so fast. And, you know, and that was kind of a hard, you know, that ability to let go without like micromanaging everybody and like trusting the people around me. And, you know, people like Valerie, who's in the car, producer, and having people around me who I could, you know, I think so much of being a first-time filmmaker is like, I know how to do this, trust me, guys, I know how to do this, I know how to do this, and like, meanwhile, I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing.
Right.
And, you know, just leaning on the people around and be like, I don't know the answer to that. Like, what, you know, and that's the thing with first-time filmmaking is like, even though you've done a lot of shorts, like when you jump into a first-time narrative, you're just like, there's so many things that just like when you scale up exponentially, it doesn't feel like you know what you're doing it for the first time. And so there's so many things where I was just like, I don't know if this is the right way to do it, but it feels good. But I also like, if I am totally this up. And so that was that. It was just really learning how to trust the people around me to be like, hey, like if you need, like come to us for help. Don't take all the burden, you know, that's what we're here for. And learning that, you know, on a short, it's like, no one cares about it more than you. And it was really beautiful to be like working on something where it's like, oh, everybody cares about this movie just as much as I do. And that's the only way we can actually get it to the finish line.
Incredible, man. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, I feel like I want to piggyback off of that because I feel like that hands-on spirit is what kind of helped me throughout this process. So I was actually here as an audience last year in January, and we were here with a project. I mean, I was here just, you know, meeting some people for a project that was ready to go, and then, you know, we'd lost momentum with the strike, which we supported, but it felt like we went backwards because somehow it felt like the industry was using that to cancel in some conversations and not, you know, going back to the drawing. Like after the strike, it was still hard to pick up on the conversations. Even during that, became so difficult. And I think that part of the process of getting a big project done, like your next feature, puts you into a place of a little bit of an operator. You have to be that person who's like going, having meetings, general meetings. You have to pitch yourself. You lose your voice in the process of sometimes pitching or trying to become that much needed business person for yourself or advocating for your project. Even if you're surrounded by, you know, management or whatever, you still have to advocate for your projects. And along the way, I felt I lost that spark. And actually somebody in this room inspired me to go back to create your own thing, you know, to go back to the drawing board. Like I had a feature, and after a feature you want to, you know, you just focus on your next feature. But I wanted to see, do I still want this? Do I still love to be on set? Like it's been a couple of years since my last project. And so I went back to connecting to my friends, you know. Eloy, who's here, my DP, who've been together for many, many years. We kind of like grew up as filmmakers together. Mercedes, my co-writer and wife and love. And Gabby, or Star, who's also a producer. Blaine, who's around there. Like, we all came together and decided to do something using our own voice, something that has not, that didn't need it to ask for permits or ask for approvals or notes or anything. And that felt very refreshing. And I feel out of that energy, the people responded. The film has that spirit of like a kind of like a doer's kind of engagement. And I feel like that's what took us here and made us overcome the obstacles, for sure.
You know, I think you and Sean, everyone, really spoke on something important about building your film community and leaning on your circle to overcome these obstacles and challenges, because we all can't do it by ourselves, right? You know, and honestly, I think a place that does that so well is IMDb and IMDbPro. There's so many, it's just a place where you can find your community. I truly believe that, you know? And just, I want to say on IMDb and IMDbPro, there's this incredibly new feature where you can choose how to self-identify by sexual orientation, gender, disability, religion, however you want to identify, so you can be your most authentic self on IMDb, so the community you want to attract can find you, and you can go out and find the people that you want to attract, right? And so I'm just curious, have any of you ever used IMDb or leaned on it at all to kind of just find people, look people up, you're nosy, like, what are they credits?
All
you know what I
day,
mean?
every
It's like,
day.
talk to me about it.
I mean, you know, as much as we have like big institutions of, you know, with agents, and I love my agents, but there's nothing like IMDbPro. You know, with docs, my crew is not necessarily as big as a scripted crew, but you know, from finding like looking at people's credits and understanding, like doing the game of like Kevin Bacon on IMDb, like okay, this person I really think I should shoot with, but I need to go look at all of their past credits, you know, really quickly, and look at who produced that. Oh, who do I know that I can, you know, talk to get a real sense of, is this, you know, is this camera operator that I'm going to pick up for a day, are they going to be a good fit for my team? With docs, we have a very short window to make our subjects feel very comfortable. We are meeting civilians all the time and trying to make them feel like there's no cameras anywhere, there's no crew, like, because we need to dive into a conversation so that when you as a viewer are watching, you feel very connected to them, and you don't feel like they're you know, there's a camera in their face. And so crew and collaborators and finding those people on IMDb Pro are critical, from sound to camera operators to gaffers to like whoever it is. And I use that as my tool to be able to, like, not reference check, but vibe check. That's what I call it.
Yes, vibe check.
Vibe check. Is this good? Is this person gonna? Is their craft gonna take over my set? Because I can't have that happen. They gotta nail it while being kind of invisible, you know? And so that's the biggest thing that I love about IMDb. And I'm now a company owner, and so it's priceless. I'm constantly trying to find new filmmakers on IMDb Pro, looking up new films that I've heard about, like doing, you know, the game of like, oh, who is that filmmaker? I heard about this film. I want to know everything about them. So it's just I'm on it every day.
Yeah, same. And I'm not just saying that because I work there. I really am. I actually am. So, I have a quick fun question. What's a real life talent you think you should have an IMDb credit for? For example, I think I should have one maybe for drinking too much coffee before 9 a.m. or procrastination or just shopping too much, guys. You know, it's a thing. What about you? Yeah, Sean, I'm looking at you. You just made natural eye contact. That's my opinion.
I think when we're shooting films in production, I think it's definitely like drinking 4 cold brews before call time. That was like my
That's how we do
routine
it.
every morning. Like before production started, I had cut coffee and like caffeine for maybe 3 or 4 months, and I was like feeling nice and healthy. And my DP was like, "Are you gonna be able to do that during production?" I was like, "I'm gonna try." And then like day 2, it was like, dude, like, you know, Phil's coffee, 3 like cheers, chug, cheers, chug, get to set, another coffee. It's like, okay, here we go.
Yes, I feel seen right now. We understand that in the film community. You know, when it comes to the kind of stories that you want to tell, I have such a profound respect for filmmakers who want to push the boundaries. Because again, filmmaking is so hard, y'all. So I want to do another prompt, you know? When it comes to filmmaking isn't easy. Each project is. Let's start with you, Lana.
Filmmaking isn't easy. Each project is a totally different animal. It's kind of like I was saying earlier. And it is, I was listening to Sean talk about the kind of feelings of making his first feature and really thinking, it never changes. That's what's amazing about it. You have these first-time jitters every single time, but you also bring in all the stuff you've learned. But I want to reiterate that what everyone was talking about earlier about the importance of the collaborators and of the relationships and of the team. And I know that's what this panel is about in a lot of ways. It means everything. And actually, Sean and I were talking before the panel about how sometimes it's better to work with someone who has way less experience, but vibes with you and your project, and you connect with them really easily, and you feel comfortable with them, because so much of filmmaking is very vulnerable and exposing yourself, and there's honestly a lot of fear in it all the time. And so surrounding yourself with people who you feel safe with and who can reflect you and the world of your film is so much more important than bringing in someone with 40 years of experience who, maybe they're a veteran and maybe they know this amazing way of making movies, but it might not be your way of making movies.
That's an incredible answer. Thank you for that. Anyone else? Alex? I'm just picking people now.
Each project, each film is a learning opportunity. I love every film that I do because I get to totally dive into an ecosystem that I probably would have never, I didn't know anything about, or I knew very little about, and my job is to go in and okay, I know something about this athlete or this subject matter, but I want to find the B-side because that's what I would want to see. I would want to dig and dive and try to find a different angle, to bring a person's story to life. And so I feel like every film that I do, and because docs last for so long in making them, that I feel like it's almost like a graduate program after I get through, okay, now I am somewhat of an expert in this subject matter. And so I like that every film, there's no duplication, there's no repeat, there's no repeat button. Every time it's a different learning experience.
Right on, right on. Obviously we're in 2024, so much advancement in technology. I'm just curious, in what ways are you embracing or maybe navigating new technology in your storytelling and the narratives that you want to bring out?
Well, AI is a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to say, I just did the sound mix for my film.
Wow.
My sound mixer was like, please let me just AI these 80 lines. And I was like, I don't know. He's like, people can sound so much better if I AI it. I'm like, this is a documentary. I don't know if I feel comfortable with that. And we didn't do it, but I did let him do it once because the subject of the film turns to me and mispronounces my name. They say, Lana, can you help me out here? And I was like, let's just AI it and make it Lana, because I don't think I can handle hearing my name mispronounced in the final film. But that's really changed everything. And it's very interesting with the strikes and the agreements that have resulted from the strikes, because it's just the click of a button and you can replace every actor, every subject's line with multiple takes on AI. And I don't know what the ethical answer to that is, but it's so big that we can't even conceive the changes that are going to happen in 1 year, 2 years from now.
Absolutely. That's an honest answer right there. Yeah. Anybody else want to piggyback off that?
I think that as a filmmaker that speaks, that it's working in English from a different language, it became a tool for process. I think AI is really about process, and it should be empowering to creators as opposed to just trying to replace creators. I'm not that interested in generative technology when it's just let's say, kind of like audience facing. I'm not that interested in the result, but I do think there is a huge opportunity to overcome certain limitations. In my case, language barriers are a thing. When I'm writing a character in English, I sometimes have the intuition of a phrase, of a turn of phrase in English that I think it works or not. Usually I would torture my friends in the middle of the night, my American friends, and say, call them and ask them, is this a thing that you could say? And now ChatGPT could give you a first approach of something like that. You can kind of come back and forth and have some. You can put a sentence and ask directly, do you think this works? And this is uncanny that I'm saying this so sci-fi, but it does work. And I have found myself improving in my writing in English, and the voices of certain characters have become more specific, having a back and forth with AI, I think, yeah.
Yeah, I think we're all familiar with ChatGPT. Who hasn't used ChatGPT up in here?
Everybody.
Right?
Everybody's a closeted user. Nobody wants to admit they use it.
I love all of your projects specifically because they come from such a specific point of view. in narrative that reaches so many, maybe even marginalized audiences, right, that needs to feel seen. What narratives do you feel have been excluded from film and television? And what stories do you maybe want to see told and retold?
Sometimes I don't know if it's. I mean, yes, there are a lot of marginalized voices, for sure, and we need more films. Like we need more stories being told globally from all different perspectives, and people that are on this planet and contribute and have stories and are human beings living their lives in a different way that we may not be used to seeing on the big screen. So I think that will always be a North Star for all of us to find those stories. But I also think that sometimes with filmmaking, being a filmmaker from a different group, as a Black woman, I feel that my perspective on anything is going to be probably very different than my white male counterpart. And so it's not so much that I feel like we have to go and unearth stories that have never been told. There's a place that is necessary, and that is something that I get really excited to try to do. But I don't want to lose sight of there are stories that need to be retold, from a different vantage point. Because if you're doing a biopic and you've missed out all these nuanced things about this person, because to one filmmaker it wasn't that big of a deal, and to another filmmaker it was everything. To me, that warrants retelling that story.
Yeah, round of applause. Definitely. Thank you. Lana?
Yeah, I mean, so many stories, perspectives are not largely included in our industry right now. And it's an industry, I mean, it's I feel I know very deeply from movies the perspective of 40-year-old white men with glasses who grew up in Westchester. You know what I mean? It's not that I don't like that perspective and experience, but it's so specific. And it's such a loss for an entire art form to not actually reflect humanity and the human experience in a fuller sense. So we all have such responsibility to make our industry way more inclusive than it currently is. And it's to make the art form better, though. It's not some shallow PC move. It's just to make movies better.
Absolutely, absolutely. So you all are such incredibly talented filmmakers. I'm just curious, along your journeys, what's just a quick bit of advice that you were given, that you take with you, maybe on every set, that you think about maybe during some tough times? It doesn't have to be long advice at all, but maybe a phrase, keep going, whatever. I always tell myself, meet the moment and rise to the occasion, right? What about you, Nico?
Yeah, I was just hearing you say that because I think the best thing I heard is over-prepare, and then on set, be present. Let go of everything that you've been planning. I mean, of course, follow the idea, but be open to what is happening in the moment. Because in a way, even a fiction is a documentary of people creating a movie, right? It's always something that happens in the moment, and as a control freak, I think I have to remind myself, well, this is what is happening now. This is what you got to embrace. You can't just force reality to do what you want it to do, because this is precious. This is not going to happen again. So I think that's the one thing. Over-prepare and be open on set to just your plans.
That's some great advice, yeah.
I guess you
yes.
haven't.
Alex?
My first feature film that premiered here 13 years ago was on Roger Corman, B-Movie God. And that was my film school making that film, because I got to interview everyone from Ron Howard to Peter Fonda to Martin Scorsese to Jack Nicholson. All of that film, I wrote down a log, and I have all of these guys, every lesson that they either got from Roger or that they told me in the interview, and that's my Bible. And literally before I start any project, I kind of do my little, I look at my sheet and I kind of remind myself of things. So it's not one particular thing, but it's a few. One is from Kubrick that Jack Nicholson told me, which is everything cuts, which is amazing because as for docs, you're in the editing room and you're gonna off yourself because you're so it's just the end, and but everything cuts. Roger taught me you will always get money, but be careful who you're getting your money from.
Let's take a beat on that. Let's take a beat. Let's take that in for a second. Yep.
And then there's kind of a lesson and to be very quick on set, to be very efficient, Scorsese, it was all about pre-production and mapping out everything that you possibly can, even in docs. I try to map out as much as I can with my shot, like everything, because I know that once we get to set, everything's going to go left. Those are a few of my...
That's some great advice right there. Thank you. Sean, what about you?
I've had so much good advice over the years. The two things that I kept, I think, in the back of my head on our feature film were two quotes. One was, I don't know where this came from. I think it might be Spielberg, but if I misquote you, Spielberg, I'm sorry. It was, if you can get them to laugh, they'll trust you to cry. And so that was something I sort of had as a North Star. If you can have the candy, you can have the medicine kind of, or whatever. And then this other one was from an interview with Spike Jonze, who is my hero. And I just have it like saved on my desktop, and every once in a while I'll open it. And he said something about some project like years and years ago, and it was like, things don't fall apart in like one fell swoop. It happens inch by inch by inch when you compromise like inch by inch, and then all of a sudden you look back and you realize you're actually very far from where you wanted to be. Yeah. And so I kind of had that in mind while working on the feature.
That's great. Thank you, man. Lana?
I'm going to write down everything cuts,
Okay.
Alex.
No,
That
this
is
is being
very good
recorded.
over the
Recorded, right?
documentary
It's being
edit room
recorded.
when you're banging your head against the wall. And I forgot you did the Roger Corman film, which was so great, by the way. And I'm excited for you to see my Psychics movie is a lengthy female trouble section, so I can't wait for you to see that. But I think my quote is the author George Saunders, the American short story author, has said, "Steer towards the rapids." And I like that because it reminds me to not chicken out. You know what I mean? Go to the emotional, scary place. So that's a quote that I sometimes have taped above my desk.
Yes. These are gems, y'all, and this is being recorded, so we can go back to these whenever you need it, right? We're almost done there. One last question. When it's all said and done, what do you hope to do with your filmmaking?
When we die?
I know, right? Wait. That did sound kind of deep.
When is it everything is
we
said
don't-
and done?
Let's not go that
This is
far.
so
Maybe
scary.
in like 20 years, 30 years. What do you hope to accomplish in the end with your filmmaking?
I really hope that I can look back and still be friends with the people I made the films, because they're so hard to make, and sometimes they creates tensions with people you love. Yeah. I hope I can look back and I did a lot of them, and I still friends with everybody.
Right on. Alex?
I selfishly hope my son is proud of me. Yeah,
Don't make me
I'm gonna
cry.
Because I was so proud of my mother, who was such a big influence on me. And every time I make something, I'm like, is my son ever gonna watch this? And like, or is he gonna be embarrassed by this? And so that's my.
That's great. Thank you for sharing.
That's a beautiful
Sean?
answer. I think I want to just make things that I'm proud of, that I hope other people can see themselves in as well. Kind of what we were talking about voices earlier, just helping the world feel more expansive with different voices. And kind of what he was saying earlier, I hope to get to make stuff with my friends for the rest of my life. I think that itself, separate from any sort of Sundance validation, like making stuff with your friends really is like the dream,
Absolutely.
So yeah.
Absolutely. Lana?
I love that Nico pointed out that we all die, because it's true. It's as much about the journey
true,
as the
though.
end result. No, but it's true. That's why the journey and the process is as important or more important than the final film. I think we've all said that. I think that's so valuable and true. And I guess that the one thing that I hope is left after I die in my films is that I hope, for at least one person, they provide a slightly new way of understanding the world that's comforting or healing or transporting for them in the same way that movies have been for me, and I think for everyone on this panel.
Amazing. Let's give a round of applause for these panelists one more time, y'all.